One of this week's releases might have brought the most mainstream attention to black metal since the Satanic Panic. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's album art of the week. It's the weekend, and that means we got new metal albums to talk about. And as always, before I talk about my top 5, we've got some news to talk about and some big band releases to talk about, so let's jump into that. As we talked about on this week's podcast, today, Friday, July the 7th, Nita Strauss has dropped her second solo album, The Call of the Void. I compared this album to Santana's Supernatural, except it's metal, because you got a guitar virtuoso in Nita Strauss with many guests, including Chris Motionless, David Draymond, Alice Cooper, Marty Friedman, Alyssa from Arch Enemy, and that's just to name a few. Make sure you check it out, and I'll have a link to that podcast at the end of the episode for you to click on, so don't go anywhere. There's also a new album from those groove metal / metalcore masters, the Raven Age. It's called Blood Omen. If you like it melodic and groovy like that, but you want to still headbang, check that one out. And speaking of groove metal, we've got a double album drop from the Butcher Babies called An Eye for an Eye and Till the World's Blind, which, I mean, those two album titles seem to make sense. Like the Butcher Babies, you get 2 albums this week. And as I alluded to in the intro to this episode, we might have just seen the biggest mainstream exposure for a black metal band since the Satanic Panic, because Braid was just featured in the New York Times talking about his latest release, Braid 2, which is, of course, as I said, black metal, but it's got that Native American sort of subtle twist to it. If you liked Braid 1, then you're sure to like Braid 2. Now let's talk about the top 5. Coming in at number 5, we've got Lockjaw with Relentless. This is metalcore from Texas, and the reason why I like this one is because it reminds me of that Killswitch Engage era metalcore. Now, I'm not saying that they sound like Killswitch Engage. I'm saying they sound like metalcore from that era, that real melodic, real guitar heavy metalcore with the big anthemic choruses. That's why I like this. And you know, it actually makes sense that they sound like that because they've been around since the early 2000s, late 90s. So of course they're going to have that sound that I dig so much. You will too if you check them out. Coming in at number 4, we've got Snuffed on Sight. The name of the album is Smoke, and this is brutal death metal from San Francisco. I don't normally like brutal death metal. I like death metal that's brutal, but the genre, brutal death metal, is not normally for me because to me it sounds a lot same, especially with the vocals. But this band sticks out to me because they've got this real start-stop, herky-jerky sort of style that makes it extra groovy with some stank on it. And I kind of feel a little bit of West Coast rap influence in there. They don't rap, they don't do anything remotely close to rapping. It's just this real subtle sort of attitude that they bring to the music that I hear. And then there's a couple of samples in there too. That reminds me of those old West Coast rap records. Maybe it's the samples. All I know is it's super heavy, and that's why it's number 4 this week. Check it out. Coming in at number 3, The Scars in Newman. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Text is on the screen just in case. And as always, every band's Bandcamp link will be in the description below so you can easily find these records. The name of this album is Woe Be Gone, Raised by Wolves. This is black metal from Italy. I like this one. I don't normally pick, straight up black metal, but this one has a much slower tempo than traditional black metal. And it does have that lo-fi production that black metal tends to have, but this doesn't sound like ass like a lot of black metal does when they do that in the bedroom sort of recording. This actually has a very clean sonic quality to it. And I think they kind of had to do that because they had to slow it down, so they're not relying on the noise so much. And you just get a much more musical version of black metal here. I really like it. Check it out. Coming in at number 2, we've got Widow's Peak with Claustrophobe. This is tech death from Canada. And this one is excellent. I like this because, yes, it's tech death. It's got that high BPM, but despite that high BPM, it's very dynamic. I can hear the bass. There's a bass player in this band that you can hear. The drums are excellent, and of course, it's super technical, guitar nerd, freak out, but it's also damn heavy. And that's why it's number 2. Check it out. And hey, before we do number 1, if you love metal the way that I love metal, then you're in the right place, and you should join the Heavy Metal Philosophy community, because that's all we do here is talk about the best new metal albums, podcast every Tuesday on all platforms, talking about the philosophy and background goings-ons in metal. Metal all day, every day, right here. Hit those buttons. Hit like if you like these bands because it helps spread the message. Thank you so much. Now let's do number 1. Coming in at number 1, we've got Ophidian Memory with Our Shattered Garden. And this is melodic death metal from Iowa. Don't let that genre title fool you. It's really death metal. It's super heavy. It's got stank grooves, screaming the whole time. There's no clean singing anthemic choruses here. It's brutal the whole time. What makes it melodic death metal instead of just straight up death metal is the guitars. Guitars are very melodic. You've got these great riffs with all of these soaring passages and then just crush you the whole time. I love that. That's why it's number 1. But we're not done yet. Now let's look at this week's album art of the week. This week's album art of the week comes from Geode. I'm sorry, I know I didn't pronounce that correctly. Again, links in the description to their Bandcamp. The name of this album is Nest of Veins, and look at this art. I guess that's a nest of veins. It looks like some sort of monstrous environmental hazard in a sci-fi video game. I just can't stop looking at it, wondering what it is. And when your album art makes me curious, it makes me want to listen to your album. And so I did. And it's like an instrumental prog metal sort of jam. And you know, guitar nerd here, so I loved it. I really love this art. It stood out above all the other album art this week. You know, no skulls, no castles, no forest scenes or dragons, you know, zombies. I love all that stuff too, but there's just a lot of it. This stands out. That's why it's the album art of the week. But tell me what you think. What do you think about this art? Did you like the bands? Let me know in the comments. I want to know. I'm sure there's probably some albums you heard this week that you think should be included. I want to know that too. It's always hard to just pick 5. And if you missed this week's podcast, you can click right here where we talked about Nita Strauss's new album. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.